What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo with Mike Golick Jr. That is me. With me, as always, the man on the ones and twos, Brandon Newman. Brandon, what's going on?
Oh, nothing much, Mike. I was just excited, so I just had to make a noise. You know how it works.
It is an exciting day around here. I can understand why. We've got a great show for everybody today here.
Yes.
I'm pumped about this one. Different as we've been trying to do lately, especially in the NFL offseason. Plenty more things to be able to kind of sink our teeth into. Bill Lawrence, screenwriter and one of the co-creators of Ted Lasso, getting ready to join us today. He has also been a part of the Project Shrinking on Apple TV+, was one of the creators of Scrubs and writers for Scrubs back in the day, Spin City. He has been and had his hand in a lot of everyone's favorite shows ever. So stop by to talk about season 3 of Ted Lasso, getting ready to get started, Shrinking season 1 that's going right now, and being a dad, getting beat by your kid in sports, his lifelong love affair with sports in general. So lots of great stuff. Bill's an awesome guy. I know I've seen him around with the guys over at the Dan Le Batard show, so very much a gets the show kind of guy.
Listen, if this show can start interviewing more TV writers, creators, and comedians, it's a perfect spot for me. I love it. Obviously, we love all the sports guests, but anyone that is also a comedian that's in love with their sport, come on to Gojo. We got a platform for you.
We do talk to Bill about him getting his start in stand-up when he first came out to LA to try and start getting into the business, and how that informed the way that he wrote for other actors, other people in comedic writing. So all very cool there. And we also talk about, 2 nights ago, as of the recording of this podcast, I got to go and check out not the Ted Lasso season 3 premiere, but the Ted Lasso season 3 premiere after party in Los Angeles. Shout out to Sarah Spain, a friend of the podcast, who had an extra ticket to the after party and let me tag along with her and her husband, Brad. Got to see and meet a lot of the cast there. Missed Bill somehow, ships in the night, but got to see everyone else. Fully embarrassed myself in front of Brendan Hunt, who plays Coach Beard on the show, another one of the writers and creators there. I was asked by a kid to take a picture of that kid and Brendan, and the kid didn't really ask. He sort of like gave me the eyes and handed me a phone. I had just taken a picture with Sarah, her husband, Brendan, and a couple of other people. And so I thought, oh, maybe this kid took the picture and we need to send it to one of us. And so I'm trying to click to find the picture while they're all standing there arm in arm, waiting for me to take this photo, wondering if I'm having a fucking stroke because I keep looking at this camera like, where's the picture? And they think I don't know how to take a photo. So that was my introduction to Coach Beard of Ted Lasso as I met him. Was an awesome guy, lovely man, but had to think I was an absolute fucking lunatic.
Mike, that's 2 ways that story could have went. I thought you were trying to take a picture with a young man, or at least hand the phone to Coach Beard to take a picture of you and the young man, because I'm sure you're used to people asking you to take your picture. But I'm glad you were able to just embarrass yourself a little bit, because without that, who are you?
Exactly. I am nothing if not on brand perpetually, which means I am a full-blown fucking idiot. But I am a childless idiot and a single idiot who has free time when he gets a random text message at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night to come through and meet the cast of Ted Lasso. So,
can I say, since you've been in LA, is this one of the top 5 most LA nights? Is that fair to say? This
is, I would say, like the most LA thing that I have done. Like when people think of what happens when you come out here, yes, this would by far qualify. Being able to tag along with my infinitely more famous and more connected friend in Sarah Spain and work my way into this setting where I just got to go in and shamelessly be a fanboy. Because when we get around events where it's like what's athletes and stuff like that, you're less wowed because we've been around that world for a lot longer. I'm seeing this people, and I'm trying not to go full Chris Farley show, which I did at multiple points in this interview with Bill Lawrence, where I'm just barfing out scenes that I really liked at him with no question in mind, and just expecting this wonderful man to be able to pick it up, which he does because he is great and I am an idiot.
Listen, we're all looking forward to it. We're all fortunate. You said Sarah Spain, friend of the podcast, still haven't had her on officially, but she's helped us book some other guests. So yes, definitely friend of the podcast. Looking forward to having her on in her conversation.
Exactly. So excited to check that one out. Make sure you stick around. It's a great interview. Lots of stuff we get covered there. Brandon, the NBA last night was just too giving of content overall to say nothing before we get started with this interview.
Yeah.
Kevin Durant missing his first home game as a member of the Phoenix Suns because of a rolled ankle sucks so bad. It rolled his ankle in pregame warmups, getting ready for the game, ended up getting ruled out. And watching the replay of that ankle roll, he goes up, looks like he's going to go up for a layup or a reverse layup, and rolls his plant leg. So as he goes to push off it, almost looks like he then rolls the ankle on the other leg there. For Kevin Durant, who's a 7-footer with a history of lower body injuries, this is no small thing. Like, rolled ankle looked pretty bad. We'll see what further evaluation comes from it. But what an really inauspicious start to what had already been 3 great games. They were 3-0. He'd been balling outrageous, and now they've got all the worries back.
Can I put my Stu Gotts hat on real quick?
Please.
Mike, he's ducking OKC. He's afraid of the Thunder, the team that originally drafted him. Obviously, Seattle Seahawks, doesn't matter. Now they're the Thunder. OKC, he doesn't want to play them. They're too good. I think he's ducking. He's hiding into the playoffs, Mike. I don't believe Kevin Durant. He's too frail.
Your Stu Gotts is just Jim Rome. That was Jim Rome.
No, there's more pauses with Jim Rome. There's more thoughtful consideration and then a bunch of just vomiting out. So Kevin Durant, he rolled his ankle out. Supposed to debut for the Suns. In Phoenix, everyone's there holding jerseys, very excited. He's not there. Ruled out during warmups. Can't believe it. Did you see it? Did you see the video? Wowzers, looked bad. I see what you're saying.
That's a really good. It's the same voice, just with a different meter, is what you did.
Yes, I see the connections after I did it, but yes.
That being said, your Jim Rome is excellent, so I appreciate that analysis from Limited Fake Jim Rome at Gojo Show on Twitter. Did Brandon Stu Gotts' impression sound too much like Jim Rome? So we wish Kevin Durant a speedy recovery on that. It was, I will say, one of the most unathletic things I've ever seen. Like, I have not seen an NBA player roll their ankle in such a way where I was, for a second, wondering if that person played basketball. So that's how you know it was bad, because it clearly caught him off guard.
Mike, everything about this video should catch everyone off guard. It's not just the rolling ankle video, Mike, because if you see people roll their ankle in NBA games, like, they give you a bunch of different angles to see how it happened, if they were under someone, all the stuff like that. Mike, it was set up from an angle as if someone was doing a TikTok of a dunk. It felt like it was like a self-timer video. Like,
because it was like on that ground level. It was on that perfect angle where you were ground level and could see all of his body.
And then you just see the ankle crumble while he's going up for what seems like an easy shot for Kevin Durant. The Suns should be worried, but the Western Conference should be excited.
I mean, I hope it's nothing long term. Like, again, it looked, unfortunately, having seen the video a few too many times, it looks bad, but we're going to keep hoping that it's not long term, because when he was on the floor, it looked like the team that should absolutely win the West. They had been sensational so far for all the reasons that we've talked about on this podcast. So wishing Kevin Durant a speedy recovery. Wishing Dillon Brooks a speedy recovery after Draymond Green just decided it was night time.
To be fair, Dillon Brooks came for him first.
Oh, no, listen, I'm not taking sides on this. It's just like we talked about with the fight between Luka Doncic the other day in the Phoenix Suns game with him and Devin Booker. Yeah. When you've got so much basketball trump card on your side and you're an even bigger caricature of the personality and the heel that Dillon Brooks is trying to embody, these kinds of moments feel inevitable, right? Like Devin Booker fighting with Luka Doncic feels like, hey, 2 elite scorers, 2 young guys, but Luka has the trump card of not only recently beating them in a playoff series, but also now getting to look at that team and say they had to bring in a better guy because you weren't good enough. For Dillon Brooks and this with Draymond Green, you've got Dillon Brooks and the dynamic with the Grizzlies that we know is complicated now for Ja Morant reasons that we'll get to as we update that story in a little bit. but that team tried to position themselves as the antagonist to the Golden State thing. Had the great playoff series with them, talked about, and you heard those guys chirping about Dynasty, chirping about wanting them on Christmas Day, all of which served as more fuel to the fire when the Golden State Warriors won their 4th NBA title with this core at the helm. And so Dillon Brooks in a statement said, I don't like Draymond at all. I just don't like Golden State. I don't like anything to do with them. Draymond talks a lot. He gets away with a lot too. His game is cool with Golden State, but if you put him anywhere else, you're not going to know who Draymond is. He plays with heart, plays hard, knows the ins and outs of their defense. I guess that's why they like him over there. And Draymond proceeded to go line by line into this, laying into how much nobody on the Memphis Grizzlies likes Dillon Brooks, calling him an idiot, referencing how gets away with a lot. He'd said, I have 15 texts, which is one fewer than your dumbass, I believe was loosely the quote. Talked about, again, you would talk more if you had 4 championships, a defensive player of the year, the Olympic gold medals. Like, that's the problem, is it ends up very quickly becoming a big bank take little bank situation for you and your Dillon Brooks, where you have nothing to stand on but your game. And even that, because you don't have any of the surrounding accolades, does not stand up when you talk with this person. I love when people talk their shit, but this can be what happens on the other side when you're walking to a gunfight with a knife.
Mike, it got even worse than that. Draymond addressed Memphis Grizzlies fans and said, if this is a player that you're leaning on to be a championship team, this is one of the reasons why you will never be a championship team. He goes on to say that the Memphis Grizzlies will only win a playoff game, meaningful playoff games, after Dillon Brooks is no longer a part of the team.
He said the dynasty starts after you.
Burn.
Yes, he said the dynasty starts after you.
What a bar. What a bar. Like Harrison Barnes.
Oh, it really, like, that's exactly why, like, the folks over at The Volume are paying Draymond Green to do a podcast. Like, that this is 100% of what you had in mind, because Draymond's like what we see all the time with Shaq on the Inside the NBA set when he goes at Charles. Shaq's got this incredible resume that no one can match. Charles Barkley is a Hall of Famer and an all-time NBA player in his own right, but when you stack them up next to each other, very few people are going to hold weight next to Shaq. And so that's not to say Dillon Brooks is even as close to that conversation as Charles Barkley is, but it's just a reminder of how it can go when whatever you think about Draymond Green as a player, he's got the hardware that's going to help a lot, and he's good at talking shit. Like, that's the other part, is you're also walking into his dojo when you do this. Yeah, I mean,
he punched his teammate earlier this year. Like straight up. He punched the guy that pushed him out of being a part of the big three. Like, don't mess with Draymond.
That is so true. That man, that's like when Steve Smith back in the day put hands on one of his teammates. Like, that's when you know that's probably not the person to mess with all that much.
Yeah, I mean, but hey, shouts out to Dillon Brooks though. He seems fearless, and when we talked about confidence yesterday with Charlotte Wilder, he has that cornerback level confidence that we hopefully can lean on. Like, let's just squeeze this lemon until he's out of the league. I'll say that.
Yeah, big defensive back energy. There is no doubt. Speaking of big DB energy, we're going to take a quick break and talk to another man brimming with confidence on the basketball court. That is Ted Lasso writer and co-creator Bill Lawrence, next.
All right, dude, so sorry, ready to roll.
Oh, no problem, man. I know you guys got plenty going on. Trust me.
No, man, it's a writer's room, and we were out late carousing last night because it was a premiere party for Ted Lasso, and we had to finish something today that I said I'd be done with by noon. It took me till 5 minutes ago, dude. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries. I actually, funny enough, I ended up at that Ted Lasso premiere party last night. I was looking around and I didn't see you anywhere in there.
Were you really there, dude? Because I met Sarah Spain there for like 30 seconds. So I'm surprised you weren't circling around her somewhere, man.
Sarah was my ticket in there, actually. I must have like missed her at that point. She texted me at like 8:30 last night. and said, hey, hypothetically, if I had an extra ticket to this premiere party, could you be at Brentwood by 9:35? And as she put it, she's like, you're the only single childless person I know in this area of Los Angeles who could have done it. So big win for me lifestyle-wise.
Very funny, dude.
Yeah, no.
I'm sorry. If I had known you were there, I would have found you. I'm sorry, man. I was literally hiding. It was definitely a weird, surreal night.
I was always curious, like, is that part of the process that you like or not? Those sort of moments.
Dude, have we started? If we started, I'll be much more less cursy.
Yeah, we've started, but you can curse on this podcast.
Right, cool.
Level, yeah.
It used to be my thing. I love it when it's small and you're celebrating with like the cast and crew. These things for me are often not in a negative way because I like everybody, but work-like of thanking executives and talking to different people that let us make the show and all that stuff, man. You know.
Yeah. Once I saw Tim Cook in the building, I was like, oh, it's this kind of party.
Yeah, man. Then I had to do a moment with Tim Cook. I'm still in an Emmy speech the first year. I called him T-Dog, and it kind of became a joke because I don't really know him. So I still have to have he's a nice man, but I have to have an awkward conversation with him anytime he shows up because I'm not good at that stuff, man.
I mean, listen, you calling him T-Dog, I feel like on the scale of awkward encounters is a lot less like humbling as you walked onto this Zoom and realized that you have seen me wearing man spanks on the internet. Like, that's a very interesting way to meet somebody.
Yeah, man, it's an honest connection for us. It makes you immediately vulnerable and humanizes you. I try to seem accessible the same way, dude. I wear hoodies and stuff, you know.
Well, I realized coming onto this that I essentially did like, I always called it the Ryan Russillo where I left ESPN to move to Los Angeles, but I realized you're a Connecticut guy, so I did the Bill Lawrence going Connecticut to Los Angeles trying to make it work.
I like that more because I know Russillo, but he played in my basketball game once or twice out here, believe it or not, and he's a good dude, man. I like all my connections to the people that used to be at ESPN because I don't have many connections to people that are still there.
Yeah, no, there's an interesting like breakout from all that. And ironically, a lot of people decided after living in central Connecticut, they'd rather live in Southern California, which isn't shocking.
Well, look, I mean, I wouldn't say that those are opposite ends of the scale, but they're close. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're in Connecticut, man.
I grew up in Avon and then went to high school in West Hartford.
Yeah, okay. I should have known that. I knew that. Yeah, I grew up in the mean streets of Ridgefield, Connecticut.
There you go. You say it's a
I got out though, man. I was a success story. I pulled myself up by my Fairfield County bootstraps. Got out of it.
A true miracle that you're here with us today. Here, we're appreciative you found your way out here. I'm also I'm glad you survived playing basketball with Russillo. Are you as intense on the court as Ryan is? Because I know he takes that very seriously.
He's a hard charger, man. Look, the one reason I love getting the opportunity to talk to athletes and stuff like yourself is that even though I'm not one I badly wish to be, and the perspective of how you have to change who you are. I don't think he's changed who he is as an athlete yet. I was I'm a tall guy and I'm a very adequate slasher, and I don't venture in there anymore, man. It's where you get hurt. I pay for that shit for days now. Yeah,
there's nothing less exciting than having to explain your adult injury to people that you work with.
Yeah, dude. The saddest I had a milestone. My son is about 6'5". He played ball in high school and had to stop there. And my two milestones were he finally beat me in one-on-one. And I actually had to talk to a sports therapist about it because we said first 1 to 10 games, either he has to make my lunch, for every weekend for a couple of weeks, or I had to buy him a jersey he wanted. And he went up. He's much better than me. He can dunk. He's a better shooter, better athlete. And he went up like 8 games to 2 and then started talking shit. And so I just decided to, A, I'm going to psychologically defeat him. And B, whatever, I'm going to play him tight on his jump shot whenever he drives. I'm just going to tackle him into the fucking bushes and not worry about it.
Yep.
And it got a really gross kind of pressure because I made it 9. I got it to 9 games to 8 him. And my wife had to say, like, what are you doing? Why does this matter to you? And I literally talked to a therapist buddy. I'm doing a show about therapy now, who said, you can't let him win, but you also can't do this crap you're doing. You have to play straight up, be kind. You can't foul him intentionally. And he just rocked me to win. And so that was like a huge, and then part 2 of it, I went on Dan and Stugatz's show. and I played ball because I was working out in Miami, and they speak so highly of you. You should know that. Tony played in his game, and the next day on the show, they asked him if I was good. He's like, he's got a great old man game. I'm like, dude, you just killed me. You killed me.
Between that and them, I saw them, they were reading like the critiques from Time Magazine about shrinking on there. That, you want to talk about psychological warfare, those guys, that was below the belt as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I don't think that there's, all right. I often say when I talk about this stuff that people mistake Hollywood and sports for being massively different than any other business. And in lots of ways they aren't. You know what I mean? In lots of ways, you have your shelf life, you're either hot or you're not, you have a free agent year, it's the same type. The one thing that is kind of overlap that doesn't exist elsewhere are you signed on for a job that people are going to crap on you, even if you're trying your best, if it does not come up at the level they want it to. And I've been thinking about this all day. It's fascinating. Seth Rogen gave a super interesting interview yesterday that could have been given by a former athlete instead of an actor. And he said, I don't know what's changed in our culture, but I think if the critics, or in your case, when we're talking about sports, some of the sports reporters out there knew how much the crap they said really personally, the tone of it now personally hurts you. He's like, I think they'd stop, or at least, and he wasn't saying they'd stop saying like, oh, this player sucked, or this player's no good, or this show stinks, but the tone of which some of these things are written now are so personal and damaging. I feel like I'm Teflon. And the one I was laughing about that you just mentioned, I mean, it took me to my knee, man. I felt like I had been pushed off of a bunk bed, and you're like, like
oh yeah, I will never forget, and hopefully I always try and go back to this as I go along, because you're right. I think for a lot of people, the further away they get from the process, the harder it is for them to remember there are human beings in the middle of it. And I have this distinct memory of like 4 years ago, as I'm just getting going and trying to keep that top of mind. My dad's advice was always, hey, you're criticizing the action and not the actor. Like, you can't make it personal. And that was when Eddie Lacy was still with the Packers, and he was, a heavier running back. And a lot of people would comment on that. And Eddie came out and said that affected him. Like, he had to talk to somebody about that because he battled to keep his weight down. And I remember sitting there going, my God, if he hadn't have said anything, we'd have probably all just kept going on making jokes about this like it didn't. And finally, you have some people speaking up, which I think is hopefully going to help that. But I don't even know if that's possible at this point.
I don't know, man. It's really fascinating. People don't even realize it about criticism in entertainment. When I was a kid, and I'm old, there were critics like a woman named Pauline Kael is a famous film critic, or a theater critic in Frank. The people would get excited to read their reviews, negative or positive, because they were never personally mean. They were well written, like short stories, and insightful. And even if you read that stuff about your own crap, you would be like, oh, that's a good point. Or that's it. And it never felt like someone was just hammering you. And now man, I'm literally half the time, someone doesn't like things like, well, you know what you're going to get with the Bill Lawrence show, this piece of crap. And I'm like, whoa, what happened? I'm a pretty decent guy.
I can say, what did I ever do to all of you guys? Good Lord.
I know, man. Look, the one thing that we have that actors, athletes, even hosts like yourself don't have is we have a step removed, because at least I get to live in the world of like, oh, you're judging this stuff I wrote on a pad and not me personally. Once you enter into the world of feeling like you're personally attacked, man, it's rough out there.
I think, and because I heard you talking on the South Beach sessions with Dan about your start being in stand-up comedy when you first came out here, does that influence how you write, knowing that, like, hey, part of what I'm doing in here is going to end up being in a performance with someone that's going to be on them? Like, to your point, that actor's face and name are front and center on all of that. Did that experience being on the stage, being in front of people like that, kind of influence the way that you wrote for others for that reason?
Yeah, in two different ways. Look, one is I think I started in something called multi-camera sitcoms, where I'm so old, man, that the first show I created was called Spin City, but I wrote on Friends, Boy Meets World, and there'd be a live audience. And there is nothing, if you have the experience of a stand-up of just going out and eating it, of having a night or some material that people just do not respond to in any way, shape, or form, you have an extra layer of protection for actors and actresses you like, because for them to die up on stage with something they didn't even write. I still remember, by the way, is I said Mike Fox is the nicest guy in the planet. The coolest thing of, an icon for me was suddenly saying stuff I wrote. And I remember the first year I convinced him to try a joke that he didn't like. I'm like, I'll just try it. It'll be funny, man. And, in front of a packed audience, he did it. It was silence. And he broke in the middle of the scene. He just goes, "I'm going to murder you, Bill." And then the audience all laughed. I'm literally like, "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, man." So that aspect of it, of not wanting to subject people to that, I think it drives you, makes you work harder. I think the other thing it teaches you stand up is to look. There's two schools of writing, especially comedy writing. There's a lot of, no judgment. There's a lot of men and women that are they're married to their words, and it might sound jerkish, like when I go, "Oh, you're not allowed to riff or to change a line from and to also or whatever." And before you go, "Well, that's not fair," it's no different than like if you or I got hired to do Romeo and Juliet, which would be horrible casting. But if we got hired to do Shakespeare and we showed up on Broadway and I was like, "Hey, I'm probably going to riff a couple of these lines," they'd be like, "What? We don't change it. That's not how it works." So I get it. But for me, what stand-up taught me was there are different things that comics and comedians can say that only work because they're coming out of their voice, And try it sometime. I told some young comedy writers I was teaching at a college to say, one of your favorite stand-ups sometime, go online and try to find a written out, version of one of their bits, unless it's a hard setup, punchline, whatever, just to read it. Sometimes it's not funny. Sometimes the shit Chappelle, until it comes out of Chappelle's mouth or Bill Burr's mouth, or Sarah Silverman's mouth, sometimes it, on the page, you're like, "Oh, that's kind of," and then when they say it, you're like, boom. So with TV writing, I really embraced I say with actors and actresses, when I do a pilot, the characters belong 50% to the performers and 50% to the writers. But then they get to start taking more and more ownership every week, till on my shows that work the best, the cast by the end of the first season can say stuff like, "I wouldn't say that," or "Is it okay if I say this differently?" Or "The best thing is I'm going to do a different joke here." And they do it all on their own. And then someone comes up to me and goes, "Hey, I love that joke." I just go, "Thank you." I don't care.
It's honestly, the parallels with that are actually incredible, kind of with soccer at the forefront of Ted Lasso, because really you think about that for the manager, that's what, you can put so much into them, and then these people have to take ownership. For you, then, with that as that style of giving some of this autonomy to the actors, do you watch some characters like change markedly from what you had in mind when you're cooking this up? Like when you look at Ted Lasso now, where we're at in season 3, is there a character who you never would have predicted evolved the way they did over the course of the show because an actor took some risks or took liberties with that?
Yeah, look, I can tell you right on the bat, that's a completely different situation, only because I called it the answer key. Jason Sudeikis was such a strong, and still is. I mean, he's running the show the third year. I'm able to do other shows because the guy's just not an actor and writer. He's a showrunner. And so for me, third season, I go, "Hey, I'm going to go do Shrinking and this thing called Bad Monkey in Miami." And he ran the show himself. The reason we call him the answer key, this is what's so weird, is to be in a writer's room with somebody that is pitching and developing stuff for their character. And before you put it on film, you can find out if it works because he'll just say it right next to you,
Damn.
Which is freaky. The most interesting character change for me, I was blown away by, is the dude that plays Roy, Brett Goldstein, is a comedy writer and a comedian first. And you rarely see this. He's the exact antithesis of his character in real life. He's so sweet and so sensitive and kind, and he doesn't talk like this, and he doesn't growl, And so to see him, instead of just kind of like, a lot of times some of the actors and actresses in comedy, especially that we love the most, are playing versions of themselves. You know what I mean? And that's what we respond to. You want to believe that Tom Hanks is really like that. My other show, Harrison Ford, is really like that. And it's fascinating. when somebody takes something that from the second they get the part, you're like, oh, it's going to be a much more kind of open, emotional, sensitive guy. And he just to say, Brett's taken it so far, you will be hard pressed to find a picture of him in the media smiling. He decided back then, he's like, man, if I'm going for it, I'm going for it. Even his photos, it's this, just absolute asshole face. You know what I mean? I don't think anybody expected him to fly that way. It was really cool. He crushed it.
And I think with him especially, he kind of is a big part of what I think you do really well. And hearing your talk about sports and your background in sports and how much you love that, it makes a lot more sense, because the one thing, as I've, talked about the show and talked with people about the show, part of me always goes back to the former athlete stuff. And I feel like you guys hit so many of these smaller notes about locker room dynamics and about players transitioning away from the game and the difficulties with identity crisis, in addition to the obvious, overt conversations about the mental health around athletes. And I feel like Brett's character in Roy, especially the beginning of season 2, you really see so many of the parts of every former athlete, or I'd say the vast majorities, transition from the game into whatever their next role is. Like, did that just come from you and your experience? Were there other people that you talked about with that? How did that go?
Well, look, this show in particular, I think one of the cool things about it was Jason and I initially connected. He's a hell of a basketball player. He's a sports nut. One of our first bonding things the first year was he came out to my basketball game and immediately, that's how you judge somebody. He immediately equipped himself very well. He's Midwestern boy with a Midwestern jump shot, and so on that show, the most interesting thing about it, as far as being knowledgeable about the sports, it was going to be a sports show, so we had to kind of be obsessive about it. Brendan Hunt, who plays Coach Beard, is truly an encyclopedia of this stuff, and we're all fans. But the bigger issue was not knowing the Premier League the same way, and really discovering that it's the closest thing to regional college football, here, in the way that they have psychotic localized fan bases, and that kind of, a small city passion that also transcends nationally. We had to staff that show with Brett Goldstein, whose parents are all Tottenham Hotspurs, and Phoebe Walsh, whose family are all people that grew up with the passion of Premier League. So we understood it and could equate it to all our athlete friends. But what's so more interesting is your question's so good, because it's the perspective. I think, to me, it's easy to do sports when you're doing sports. But I think if you grow up in that world, guy or girl, Jason and I connected, and a lot of my shows end up being about mentorship and coaching. You know what I mean? And Dr. Cox on Scrubs was without a doubt half my English teacher and half my basketball coach. You know what I mean? And and even on Ted Lasso, Jason made all the writers, when they showed up for interviews, you had to tell a story of an influential mentor in your life. Of someone who either made you believe you could get over a hump, or someone that made you believe, because having anybody make you believe you can do it in sports, or grow up in Connecticut and suddenly be writing comedy, even though I didn't know anybody west of the Mississippi, you need somebody that gives you that I believe in you, stuff, whether you register that it's happening or not, and it's amazing that everybody has those stories regardless of walks of life. And look, eventually I'm going to do one too many podcasts and people are going to realize I write the same thing every time, but I'm so into that world, of like the people that got us here along the way. It's one of the reasons, not to take you to it, but over the years, I've loved your relationship with your pop. It's inspiring on the same level, and it's the stuff I like writing about,
No, I think those are the things that everyone can relate to. Like, I always, go back to that. That was the number one thing I got notes about when we were doing the show together, was people that say, oh, I work with my mom every day, or I work with my old man, and they see themselves in that part of it. I will say, to that end too, you shouldn't feel too bad about how that basketball game went with your son, because my dad was a high school and college wrestler, had the same thing. He always threw on the offer is, whenever you think you're ready, we'll go out and we'll go after this. It ended up being Easter Sunday on my grandmother's front lawn in the neighborhood my dad grew up in. We were out full blown, like college wrestling style, getting down on the mat in the front yard in our Easter Sunday clothes, absolutely embarrassing our entire family in the neighborhood.
Outstanding.
Cooked his ass. I absolutely cooked his ass. But so
it's outstanding. I will tell you, I was thinking about this the other day. My dad's struggling right now. He's an older guy, and it's a bummer. But I was thinking about him the other day, and I went back into some photo albums, and not to get into tennis too much, but my dad was a good tennis player, and I should have beaten him much younger. And I finally, at 16, just got over it and just kicked it. When you flip the switch, I just kicked his ass. Mm-hmm. Just absolute beat down. And that's why I love my mom. My mom was like, let me get a picture of this. And my dad turned to the camera and gave double barrels, and I have that in my photo album because she sent it out as our Christmas card. It said, Merry Christmas from the Lawrences. It said inside, it's like, this is the first time Bill beat his dad in tennis. And by the way, there was no joke aspect of it. He was covered in sweat and just furious. It made me so happy.
Oh yeah, it's better when it's earned like that. Yeah, and like you said, you had that conversation. It can't be a gimme. You can't just give it up. This has got to be earned, not given. So
yeah, can't cheat, but you can't give it up.
That's
the problem is though, once that dam breaks, dude. Once that dam breaks, you're done. And now I've literally, in my own basketball game, when my son's in town from college, if I'm guarding him, he'll literally, it's like the shit I used to do. It'd be like, mouse in the house. I'm like, dude, don't do that. I'm like, don't do that, man. It's uncool. Uncool. I'm 6'3". I'm not tiny. He's a beanpole, man.
Man, it's tough whenever we get a little, you can't give us an inch. That's the one thing I know as a son now of 33 years, you can't give us an inch because we will absolutely take a mile. Oh, it's
absolutely bleak, man. So upsetting.
No, it definitely is. That seminal moment there for the personal life here for you now, like, do you get nervous when you've got something like this coming up anymore? Like for you guys, season 2 was, in some ways it felt like a risk. It took a very serious turn on a show that had been sold to so many people as this big hopeful thing. You've got season 3 coming out right now. You're in the middle of season 1 of Shrinking. Do you still get, like, for lack of a better term, pregame jitters with a lot of these?
Yeah, man. The Hollywood's really weird because it's like people have been nice to me, like, oh, you got a lot of good shows. I'm really lucky that all my absolute stinkers were so bad they never got on TV. A couple did and were awful, and I hide from them and keep my head buried. I think the thing that we all fear the most is expectations. Do you know what I mean? Out here. And that's, from my point of view, there's two things. One is expectations, what I'll get back to. The first one is the most fun version of this gig are casting people and working with people that you want to hang around with anyways. Because, again, to equate it to team sports, it's like being at Thanksgiving with your family, but for fucking 6 or 7 months instead of a weekend, right? And there's always all the people you love and love hanging out with, and there's always the crazy drunk uncle, and the cousin you just want to beat down and all that stuff. So you generally work with people you want to spend time with, hopefully anyways, or forge those relationships. And from my position, there's a feeling of not wanting to let them down. Easy example, man, of Harrison Ford is an awesome dude, icon for me. He's 80 years old. If I worked hard to get that dude to do this and it came out and everybody was like, he sucks and it's awful, I would be like, oh man, what did I do to Indiana Jones? It would crush me to same thing with Mikey back in the day. You go on the one hand, man, it's so fun. I'm like, oh, Family Ties, Back to the Future, Mike Fox. If I had written his return to TV show and everybody's like, dude, this sucks, the aspect of letting someone down that's a teammate you care about is there. And then the other thing is I find it so much easier to be – the first year of Ted Lasso was just fun because Jason, Joe Kelly, Brennan Hunt, me, the 4 creators, the staff, we didn't know if the show would work. We just knew it was cool at that time in the world to be working on something optimistic and hopeful, and that we all dug on doing that every day. And then it worked, and that was like the icing on the cake. It was really cool. what comes with the second year then is expectations, when it's like, whoa, this is, by the way, and I was always blown away because I hadn't been through it that much by how quickly in sports it goes from, even for the winners, man. Well, you just won the NBA championship. You guys think you can repeat? I'm like, as 10 minutes ago. I feel like, it's insane. And so on a couple of these shows, a real feeling of it better be as good as last year. It better live up to these heightened expectations. That kind of underdog status is the stuff that's more fun. And yeah, I feel the pressure of that in a way that it's so self-defeating, because doing anything for results never works out. You know what I mean? To be doing it because you dig it and you're trying to do the best version of it you can, and the results land where they land. It's just hard. Man, it's just hard.
Yeah.
It's the same people that say winning it isn't everything. It's it logically, but emotionally it tears you up.
Oh, there's no doubt, especially when that's the process that you're so buried in day to day. You said you don't try and tune out a lot of the criticism, a lot of the praise. Is there like a person in your life that you look to, or like a mentor, someone where it's, hey, if I'm getting it right, this person is telling me so?
Yeah, man. I used to want to call my production company Noble Failure Productions, because I always felt like if you can show something to your friends and family without feeling like an idiot, you got to call it a win.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And that's not always the case, because when you're young, there's so many things that can go wrong, man. It's like it's fun with you to keep equating things to sports. But I always say, like, unless a team's doing, I'm a Sixers fan, unless they're doing the Sixers, process of tanking, every one of these teams, when they're put together, there's people in rooms, somewhere in America going, this could work. We're going to win.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Yeah. All shows start out like that. You can make a mistake with writing and casting and the director and whatever. Or when you're a young guy, you can go in and pitch a show to a network and you're like, I'm going to do a cool show about a young newlywed couple in their 20s, and it's going to be authentic and cool and what it was like to be partying and married at the same time. And then when you go in there, they'll go, we'll make it, but they need to have like a 10-year-old that talks like a 30-year-old who's super smart, and a wiseacre, and they need to have superpowers, and then we'll make it. Your head goes, I can make that work, and then like a week later, you're going, oh no, oh, this is horrible.
This has gone so badly.
And none of them are going to raise their hand when they go, whose idea was this? They're going to go, oh, his name is on the credits. You're fine. So I think, the goal of making a noble failure for my buddies and my family is almost 90% of the battle nowadays.
Makes sense. And it's the right audience, because they know you well enough to not do it. It's kind of like what you described before. All of that, if there's any criticism, is going to come from a place of love. If there's any feedback, it's going to come from a place you trust.
Also, it doesn't sting as much when people dig on you and care about you, as opposed to the random, Someday I'll get out of the confidence to go through all my just biggest shit bombs and how much they stung, man. Just awful. I made the TV version of Rush Hour. You didn't even know that existed. It was a huge swing and miss.
Oh man, you've done a good job of covering your tracks on that, because you're right. I had no idea.
That was a debacle, man. It was rough. That one was on TV, unfortunately. That was one of the ones when they're like, hey, we're going to put it on TV, and you're like, oh no.
and you know pretty early in that one, it's like, oh, this has gone very wrong.
Yeah, I think that was on for like an hour and a half. I think it was on for like 5 weeks.
Yeah, listen, my uncle was on Saved by the Bell the college years, so I know what it's like to watch someone realize in real time this might not be going well. You've had a lot of successes, obviously, too. Like, I grew up watching a lot of Scrubs. Obviously, everyone's loved Ted Lasso. Shrinking is off to an awesome start also. For Scrubs and for Ted, since we're in season 3 now, how do you think about ending something like this, especially when it's something people have built up so much love for?
Well, things have changed, man. And I'll tell you, the weirdest thing is the network TV business, and you might be a little too young for it. You probably remember it when you were a kid, was you do these shows for 8, 9, 10 years, if it's a huge success, because it would syndicate, and you're doing 24 episodes. He made, I think, like 200 episodes of Scrubs. I made 105 episodes of Spin City in like 4 years, and it lasted like 6 or 7 years. And the characters don't change much, and you figure out how to end it in a way of everybody, it's Sam Malone turning the lights off in the bar before he leaves, and it doesn't really happen in those versions. It never really happens until you're told that it's over. You know what I mean? I mean, Scrubs was different because we always knew how it would kind of end. But even that, it was on 8 years. I can't believe I spent that much of my life doing one thing. The way that streaming has changed is when Jason and I and Brennan and Joe came up with, went out and pitched it. We were pitching a beginning, middle, and end of a story. And that's why what's so interesting is it's become, the story we're telling is over, and I understand, and it's all up to Jason, but I understand when Jason's saying, no, this story is ending, and people trying to read into that. Does that mean it's an end? Does that mean it's never going to be more Ted Lasso? Does that mean there's not going to be a spinoff? And I think he's being cagey in a good way of just saying, no, we pitched a story of a beginning, a middle, an end. You can see it coming. Sports movies. It's gonna. You know what I mean? I think there'll be lots of surprises. I think people are going to dig on it. So that's the only difference nowadays is shrinking. When I went out and told them what the show was, they said, the first year is about grief, the second year is about forgiveness, and the third year is about moving forward. And actually told them, going like, hey, I don't know what every episode is, but here are the characters, and here's the beginning, middle, and end, and hopefully you dig it. And it's a new type of storytelling that I think that's why it gets weird sometimes for us as fans when shows go on a little longer than you expected, and they're vamping or treading water, because now people like their characters to change and move forward. Back then, I mean, if Sam Malone quit his job and started a new career and then got married the second, you'd be like, what's going on? Wait, why did Norm become a bad guy? Like Nate and Ted Lasso. It's all very weird. So I'm a dinosaur, man. It's been really cool to ride the wave of these changes and get to keep hitching my wagon to young, talented people. So I get to keep doing it.
Do you like that version of storytelling better this way? Yeah,
I think there's merit to all of them. I think what's really weird is I still think multi-camera sitcoms are a crack up, and I can watch old episodes of Cheers tonight and be happy.
Yeah.
For me, what's really fun about it is it's something new, and I got my 10,000 hours, man. It's to still be coming into work and psyched about it because I'm doing something different. It's an absolute blast. The only difference now is, in sitcoms you'd work till like 2 a.m. and behave badly and go out drinking afterwards when you're a kid. And now all these writers, if it ever hits like 8 or 9, I get so grumpy. They like lead me to my car like I'm like, hey, why don't you just go home? And we'll tell you everything else we did in the morning. It's going to be great,
Oh God! So wait, you were writing for Harrison Ford from your own perspective of him inside that group getting rides to work.
Dude, I am 54 years young, man. I got my first sitcom gig when I was 22, so that's a lot more years. I'm Bangsy, so people don't know how old I am.
It's smart. I wish I had that same option here going forward, but God gives his toughest battles to me. Apparently,
there you go.
You mentioned the 10,000 hours. What do you feel like at this point? Like going through this process, I'm sure you learn a lot all the time, but what do you feel like and you can give to other people now?
Well, yeah, look, I know the business aspect of it, and that's boring, but I think it matters that you know how to play the game a little bit. But I really love teaching about, kind of writing and story itself. I teach at schools. There's a cool thing out here called the Showrunners Training Program that I've taught at since its inception. And it's because TV is, again, equating it to sports. It's really weird. You can get a little training, and be a backup quarterback for 4 or 5 years, and then Jordan Love it and maybe get your chance to start this year. We'll see. Do you know what I mean? Or you can be, because of something you came up with or because of an actor or an actress, be a top 5 draft pick where people are literally going, you got to run a TV show this year, having never done it before. And just so you know, even if eventually you'd be good at this, if you fail this year, it's going to set you back. Like all these, it's going to set you back 5 years, 10 years before you get another chance again. Do you know what I mean? So that part of it is very similar. And so I try when I teach to tell these people little things to look for of, like comedy writers, any young people at home, that are funny and write jokes, I could tell you right away that jokes are easy and story is hard. And a trick that I tell all of them, if you've written something that you can take a joke from any one character and have a different character say it and it doesn't bother you, then you've made a grave mistake, because all you do is have a bunch of talking heads. You know what I mean? And that's why when you look at a show like Cheers, Cliff Clavin's jokes couldn't come out of Sam's mouth. Woody's jokes couldn't come out of Rebecca's mouth. You know, it just is character first, you know? And then look, the hardest thing, the longer you get to do it, we always keep a young person. Every one of my shows always has a couple staff writers that are just starting out, because it's so important to have somebody that still comes to work and is like, wow, a TV show. Because, man, if you are cynical and jaded and you forget that you're getting paid money to goof around, hang with people you'd hang with anyways and write jokes, and you get cynical, people can sense that shit, you know, and they do not respond, man. So, you know, because that's when you get into mail-in central.
Yeah, it's true. People, I think now we talked about some of the differences with audiences, and I think this has always been true to an extent, but you see now with younger people too, they could snip out inauthenticity
without
very
doubt.
easily.
Not only in scripted programming and human beings when they talk, you know, it's just people have a nose for it. And look, it's so interesting now that there's if my dad has 9 billion different streaming platforms he watches, and we're in trouble, right? And it used to be in the network days, you know, there would always be, they called them hammock shows. So if there's a huge show on 8 and a huge show at 9, you could put in kind of a mailed in shit sandwich at 8:30 and people would still watch it, you know? You know, you weren't even sure what you watched. You're like, yeah, no, I guess I'll go get some food during this one. I'll catch a couple of jokes. And you can't do that anymore. You got to grab, you know, at the very least, a passionate, you know, core audience. You're doing it here, man. You know, nobody can be everything to everybody. But if you get a passionate fan base that's like, I'm down with this, you got to feed them. You got to be real and authentic. You know what I mean? And you got to meet the responsibility, you know, of what got them into it in the first place, or you're doomed. You've seen it a bunch, man.
Oh, it's unbelievable. It's the absolute truth. And I feel like for you, a lot of the people that you've worked with now, I mean, going back to between Zach Braff, obviously Jason Sudeikis, Jason Segel, like all of these guys kind of exude that energy, where I was talking about shrinking with someone today, and they're like, with Jason Segel, I always believe it. Like whatever he's doing and however it comes out, I always believe it with him. And so like, that's kind of what I see. Do you see a tie that binds for some of those guys, like the most successful guys you've worked with, especially on screen, like that 3? Is there something that is a common thread for all them?
Yeah, well, look, I hope it's a combination between, you know, writer and performer. And because look, there's people that are amazing that I probably could not write their shit, you know, and I would let them down. Jason's a great example, right? I think he was, you know, the Collins brothers, he was their backup at Harvard Westlake. He's really tall guy. I'm sure you can tell, good basketball player. And he has this sweet spot that I have a specific voice, I guess, which is I enjoy mixing broad, silly comedy with moments of emotional depth. And so my shit doesn't work unless there's an actor. The fact that you said that is so flattering to him, and I'll make sure he hears it, that can be funny. And then the next second, if he's bummed out, hurting, emotionally torn up, sad, dying inside, traumatized, you actually buy it and it doesn't seem like shtick. Zach can do it. You know, Sarah Chalk was able to do it. My wife does it really well, you know, and there's a, you know, I don't want to say keep the metaphor going too much of like between coach and player, but it has that vibe that when you see, no different than, by the way, of course, Larry David wrote for Seinfeld so well, and see those guys in a room, you're like, yeah, no, I get it, you know? And when I mesh with somebody like that, you know, my one weak point is I'm so comfortable. I work with the same people over and over and over and over and over and over. Everybody from one show's on the next show, next show's on the next show. I'm just, you know, partially because I like hanging out with them and partially because it's like a cheat code.
Yeah, it got that point about that quick swing from emotional to funny. I said I was doing a podcast where we were drafting Ted Lasso episodes, and my first overall pick was No Weddings and a Funeral.
Yeah,
because as I said, that show, I think, as well as any I've watched recently, can have me laughing my ass off through fresh tears while I'm still grasping my chest. And, that episode, you've got the cutaway between Rebecca in the church and Ted, pouring his heart out in therapy. And I remember it's the second or third time I've watched through, and I'm grabbing my chest, texting my friends like, all right, well, my number one pick is caked in recency bias and locked up. So it really is a gift. And for both shows to kind of do it in different ways is incredible and really admirable.
Look, it's very cool. I'm not good at accepting compliments, and my wife said I have to look people in the eyes and say thank you. It's very cool. I obviously pass on all the love to Jason and Joe and Brandon and staff, all these knuckleheads. But man, it's I don't know if it's very interesting because I've been challenging myself to try not to do the same thing all the time. But my shtick that I love is I'm always still very tight with all my buddies that I grew up with and went to college with. He can't play basketball anymore because he tore his rotator cuff and is a heart surgeon. But the heart surgeon I'm talking about is named JD. He was my best friend from college. I stole his childhood for Scrubs. We are playing pickleball on Saturday, as we do every Saturday, because it's the one sport he can still play without tearing his arm up. But the point of this was my favorite thing is, man, if I can make guys like us get all choked up, it's my favorite thing in the world. For the way I grew up, I will ask my wife and children to leave the room in Field of Dreams when he's going to play catch with his dad. I don't even care if I've watched the movie leading up to it. I'm just like, I need a few minutes. It's not going to be a big deal. That cathartic shit, it gets you, dude. I love it.
Listen, 100%. One of the first things, and I can ask you this now and make sure this checks the box because we are now newly minted friends. You've had to spend 45 minutes with me and listen to me, Chris Farley, show you through Ted Lasso here. Armageddon, the end of that movie. Do you shed tears? Because
it got me a little. By the way, that should be. People to do their top 10 movies that you never expected in a million years would get the. By the way, because those are the ones that are hysterical when it's not even designed to do it, and the person next to you is like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Oh, yeah. 15 minutes ago, someone's riding a nuclear warhead on an asteroid, and now I'm screaming, Harry, I love you, and crying. So, yeah, it makes no sense. Are you crying
in Real Genius with Val Kilmer?
Tears and Val Kilmer should not belong in the same section of the Venn diagram, but here we are.
No, you try. By the way, you know what got me, which absolutely slayed my son. It was because he's the right age for it. Was Avengers Endgame? Tony Stark dying, man. I was in a puddle, and my wife is literally like, "What are you doing?" His daughter. He told his daughter he might not make it.
I'm gonna make him telling him I'm gonna make you cheeseburgers. Your dad liked cheeseburgers. I'm like, he did.
You can have all the cheeseburgers you want.
Yep. That's one I can vividly remember. It was the weekend of the draft in Nashville, and I went and saw it with our whole digital show unit, and everyone's eyes were dead forward during that scene because we all knew if we looked, we heard the sniffles, we didn't need the eye contact to know everyone was soaking their shirt with tears.
Not having it, man. It's so funny. My wife's like, these are people in costumes, that. Shut up. I didn't even ask you to come.
You go wait in the car. I don't need this right now.
The boys and me wanted to come. You don't have to be here. Oh, man. That's a funny list, dude. I'm going to obsess. All I do in the writer's room is try to find different ways to waste time. And tomorrow I'm going to do the 10 most surprising shows or movies that made you cry. There's an episode of News Radio that made me bawl randomly. But yeah, when that stuff happens, it's so embarrassing, but I eat it up, dude.
Tears out of nowhere. You know what? Eventually down the road, we'll have to get you back on here, and we'll just have you do the list of the 10 most surprising
I'll come
crimes.
Up, if you want, I can even just show up and do that or send it to you. I will come up with the the 10 movies that make guys cry that are embarrassing to say that you cried to these movies. I will definitely shock the world with that.
All right, there we go.
We'll put Muppet movie right up top, by the way.
I figured as much. It was going to be that or like Grease 2 or something.
Look at you, man. You've done your homework. He loves that movie.
Oh my God. It's incredible. Bill, I could sit here and talk to you all day. This has been so much fun. Obviously a huge fan, but thank you so much. I appreciate the time. Congratulations on all the success with all this. It's been a ton of fun to watch, and I promise I will be done compliment bombing you now.
Oh, dude, thank you so much. I'm a fan. It's fun to do. I think I talked to you like after I jokingly on Twitter said, I think I'm a good podcast guest. And just know that whether you saw that or not, and that's why we ended up hooking up, of the 900 tweets I got back, some of which were from podcasts that I'm quite sure had been invented during the tweet, and someone would be like, I'm doing this one in my garage. It's called Bill Lawrence Shows. It's super fun to come and talk to you, man. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the nice stuff you said, man.
No, absolutely. You're an A+ podcast guest in our book here, and I appreciate you getting back to me there. So thanks so much, Bill. We'll talk to you again soon. Definitely with that
problem.
list.
Put it out in the world. Next time you're in town, come play ball. I'll get Russillo out there too, man.
Brandon Newman, do you know what time it is?
I do, Mike. Let's go.
I am.
Woo! Sure thing, baby. This, that, and the third.
As always, if you agree that it's a sure thing, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review Gojo wherever you get your podcast. Leave us that 5-star rating and tell Brandon what a phenomenal job he has done, as always. Brandon, let's get to this. We referenced one story surrounding the Memphis Grizzlies. This is the far more important one. Colorado police announced that star point guard Ja Morant will not face criminal charges stemming from his Instagram live video that appeared to display a handgun at a nightclub in Glendale, Colorado. The police department announced Wednesday afternoon. Now, they said that there wasn't enough to charge him with a crime in that video. The Grizzlies announced that he will be away from the team for at least 2 games. Those were Sunday and Tuesday. Morant later said he was going to get help while he was away from the team, work on better methods of dealing with stress. He's now going to also miss the Grizzlies game against Golden State on Thursday, home game against Dallas on Saturday, and then at Dallas on Monday before the Miami Heat. So the earliest he could come back, as they've added now 4 games, would I believe be March 17th. It's worth noting, still haven't seen if the NBA has their investigation ongoing, because many people have pointed out in recent days, it's illegal and against league rules to bring a firearm onto a team plane, and that would result in a 50-game suspension and would end Ja's year and lead to a lot more trouble. So at least for him, though, criminal charges avoided in Colorado, but still a lot for that team to kind of get their arms around right now.
Yeah, but I do like how everyone is responded, especially their head coach. They're keeping it in-house. They don't want to... They want to add any other things to the narrative by letting any other extra word or anything leak. Like, clearly their star player needs help, and they're doing it actively, so much that he's putting basketball on the back burner to do so. So I hope this is one of many iterations of good news about this story, even after Ja comes back on the court.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I understand that this is a team that for so much of this year has been at the top 3 of the West, but we talked about it. This is a lot more existential for what you're building going forward. And if it's severe enough to where they are taking him off the basketball court right now and being this tight-lipped, it's probably worth them making sure, hey, we've got everything right with a guy that's a really big part of our team before we just get back to trying to win games and do whatever you're going to do in this year's Western Conference playoff. So we'll keep you updated on more of that as it keeps coming up. But again, Ja Morant won't be charged in Colorado for anything stemming from that IG Live video. Brandon, let's get to that. This is one you brought to my attention. CBS is getting ready to launch a 24/7 soccer channel online. Now, most people, if you're a soccer fan, if you watched a lot of the English Premier League, or a lot of Formula One, quite frankly, you've been used to Sky Sports, which is, something that a lot of American channels, NBC, Fox Sports will simulcast online for soccer, for things like the big European transfer window day, all these different things. CBS has decided that they are going to put the launch of this network, CBS Sports Golazo Network, a 24/7 streaming channel that's going to launch on April 11th online. And Brandon, we talked a little bit about this relative to college football with the Pac-12 and the potential for something like that Apple deal, where streaming and sports have had a conflictive relationship so far. A lot of people have been pissed off when games of teams that they love, Notre Dame fans and Peacock, have been put behind some sort of streaming service, some sort of online paywall, what have you. But what we talked about with Apple and the Pac-12, I think, is applicable here, which is if you've got everything in one spot and people know where to find it, now all of a sudden, I think the conversation is a little bit different. And I think directing people where to go is going to be a much bigger conversation about this. I saw an article somewhere, and forgive me for not having it actually in front of me, but it was a rumor that ESPN may consider a service that tells you the date, time, network, all of that on an app for when sporting events are. Sort of like a TV guide, but across all of the various digital platforms we have now. And with the expanded platforms that we've got, that's probably going to be as useful as it's ever been.
Oh, yeah, definitely, Mike. I mean, that's every time there's a big event, I'm spending not hours, but at least a good 15 minutes trying to figure out what article is going to post where I can actually see this thing and not an analysis on it. So as much as Apple Plus would be a perfect place to watch all of your MLS, the fact that CBS is going to house something for all of soccer, I mean, this is like studio shows, actual games, just different iterations of the thing. Like we talked about the importance of just having something on. What ESPN did was have something on and people learn about the thing they care about the most while it's on. This is what the CBS is going to offer. It obviously online is a little bit harder to do when it comes to just like having something on in the background, but for soccer fans, this is probably a godsend.
Yeah, I'd be curious what the feedback is. Again, it's a sport that I comparatively know a lot less, but I've watched, a bunch of Premier League stuff, and, it's usually flipping around. I have to go to the Premier League app, which you can use to tell you, hey, it's on USA, or it's on Peacock today, or it's on NBC or NBC Sports. And that's, I just looked it up. That's what ESPN has reportedly talked about. They've talked reportedly with major sports leagues and media partners about launching a feature that would link users directly to where a live sporting event is streamed, according to sources. So the actual partners haven't been determined, but that's one thing where it would be, hey, even if it's sending you to a competitor, you're coming to us to know where to go, and there's going to be a lot of value in that. So, again, this isn't all going anywhere, even if it's been a rockier start than maybe some would have anticipated, and going after the biggest sport in the world, usually not a bad place to start, even if it's largely American based. Brandon, let's get to the third. This one, just sheer numbers wise, blows my mind. So it was announced yesterday, after 47 years, that Hall of Famer Jim Boeheim will not be returning as the men's basketball coach for Syracuse. They lost to Wake Forest 77-74 on a buzzer beater in the ACC tournament. And then 'Cuse announced after that game that associate head coach Adrian Autry, who's been on the staff with Boeheim since 2011, would be promoted to head coach. And this comes off like a couple of really weird stretches for Jim Boeheim. It had been a grouchy year for him, right? We heard him complaining about how teams like Pittsburgh and Miami bought their programs, bought their teams this year in the wake of the new NIL rules. He had made some comments, I believe back in early in February. Jim Boeheim was asked about in an interview with ESPN regarding his future with the team, and said, I know it's my choice. I can do whatever I want. I just don't know for sure. And talked about not wanting to feel pressure with his age. He came back out and said, and kind of walked that comment back. And so now the way this has gone down, I think is going to prompt a lot of people to look at this. Syracuse's first losing season in his tenure was just last year. His accolades and his resume at Syracuse are unassailable, right? I mean, he has taken Syracuse to the tournament on 35 occasions. He's got the 03 title with Carmelo, 58 official NCAA tournament wins, which is fourth all time. Like, he is Syracuse basketball, synonymous, but everything runs its course. You could feel the frustration with that fan base and their head coach this year, and this is probably, with Jim Boeheim, as close as we're ever going to get to something resembling an amicable parting of ways.
Yeah, there's been too many ruffled feathers along the way, and you're 100% right. Jim Boeheim is Syracuse basketball at this point, and maybe that's one of the issues with Syracuse basketball.
Bro, it like, I didn't realize, because you hear 47 years as the head coach of Syracuse is already insane. There is nothing in this world I love enough to do for 47 years outside of be alive. That's it. It's too long to do anything. But then I realized, and it was pointed out to me, Front Office Sports tweeted, Jim Boeheim has been at Syracuse his entire adult life. He was there as a student from 1962 to 66 and a player.
Wow.
Graduate student from 67 to 69, assistant coach from 69 to 76 before he took over with the head coach. He's been there forever. Roger Sherman from The Ringer pointed out, Jim Boeheim had kids 25 years into his tenure as the head coach at Syracuse, and then stuck around long enough to coach those kids.
Yeah.
Like, none of this makes sense. Like, to do anything for 47 years is a wild thing to consider, let alone recruit. Have to have your livelihood determined by 18 to 22-year-olds. I can understand why this time, especially as NIL is changing some of it. College basketball's always had a complicated relationship with money and shoes and stuff like that. I can understand why this might not be the place for a 78-year-old to feel comfortable anymore.
Yeah. I mean, a 78-year-old being the gatekeeper to a historic basketball program, obviously historic for a lot of things that he has done in his time, but it just feels like there has to be some negative aspects to him still being at the helm, being the gatekeeper, as I said, to this university. So I'm glad that everyone can move on. I just hope there's no bad blood moving forward, because like you said, this is home in a very real way that really can't be repeated by any other. I mean, Coach K, maybe.
Maybe, but like, he was talking the other day, he goes, I've been unbelievably fortunate to keep this job. Mike Bray is thrilled he was at Notre Dame for 23 years. He's a puppy. I've had 47 years. Like, it's just, you didn't want to see anywhere else. Like, Syracuse is nice, the dome is great, all that stuff up there, but upstate New York is cold and dark. You didn't want to go try anything else for any amount of time. Like, this did allow me to do my dad's favorite trick. Anytime old things come up, it's to go back and check the prices and important things that were going on. And I thought I would settle in on the year 1962, when Jim Boeheim first came to Syracuse's campus, where we were in the way of the world. The cost of a new home in 1962, Brandon, was $18,200. A gallon of regular gas was 31 cents. And a gallon of milk cost you 49 cents. A gallon of milk cost more than a gallon of gas back then.
Okay, now that is wild. And it probably should be, the cows.
The artist of the year, the album of the year was The First Family by Von Meter.
Nope.
The Billboard Top 10, Green Onions by Booker T and the MGs. Let's go with movies. Best actor went to Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird. Best picture was Lawrence of Arabia. Best director was David Lean for Lawrence of Arabia. Anne Bancroft was best actress for The Miracle Worker in that year. In sports in 1962, Brandon, the Green Bay Packers beat the New York Giants to win what I think was the Super Bowl. It might have just been, whatever it was before the merger at that point. The MVP was Y.A. Tittle with the New York Giants. In college football, the Heisman Trophy winner was Terry Baker at Oregon State. The national champion was USC. They beat Wisconsin 42-37 in the Rose Bowl. And in the NBA, you had the Boston Celtics, coached by Red Auerbach, win the championship against the Los Angeles Lakers. Bill Russell was the MVP, and the Cincinnati Bearcats won the college basketball national title that year in college sports.
Okay. I imagine that was before Bob Huggins.
This was also the year Wilt Chamberlain allegedly scored 100 points in a basketball game. The Incredible Hulk debuted as a new show. And Jack Nicklaus beat Arnold Palmer to win his first major tournament. So that was what was going on when Jim Boeheim got to Syracuse as a student originally in 1962.
I mean, what a resume.
Happy trails to Jim Boeheim. Happy trails to this podcast. If you enjoyed it, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review Gojo. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review, and check us out on the DraftKings YouTube channel under the Gojo with Mike Golick Jr. tab. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Boom. Money in the bank.